There lies a porcelain throne. You're listening to the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I finally got back on the snow. And you know what? It wasn't all-time conditions and there were lines, but it felt so good to get back to life as I used to know it. The last day I got to ski was March 15th, and this felt way more normal than that. I only saw one person not wearing a mask, and this was walking to the lift from the parking lot, and 3/4 of that family were wearing masks, but the mom wasn't. And my go-to move for something like this is to tell my kid pretty loudly, "Hey buddy, let's go over this way away from the lady who is not wearing the mask." That's my passive-aggressive way to tell her to take a hint. And as far as safety goes, the summit at Snoqualmie did a great job making me feel like it was a smart choice to come out and go skiing. And on snow, my brand new Elan ripsticks stayed away from the rocks and they carved the mountain up like a Thanksgiving turkey. They were so fun and I can't wait to get them on soft snow. But it was a real treat to be out there and I could have skied forever. While I'm usually in terrible shape when ski season starts, something strange happened to me this off-season. For the first time in my life, I embraced exercise. And it all happened because I started to get fat and I could feel it. I'm sure you remember my beer drinking challenge. I pretty much slammed a beer for the first 30 weeks of quarantine. My drinking record was 31-2, and it was super fun, drinking against listeners, and every time I won something. It was getting so ridiculous that eventually I made losers donate to the High Fives Foundation in my name. And while that was really fun, charitable of me, and arguably the best competition happening on the internet during quarantine, after defeating a competitor one night, I was getting off the couch, and I was like, damn, I feel fat. And then I went and weighed myself. I was 190 pounds, pretty much on the dot. I was a little heavier, I feel like, in 2008, but my wife was pregnant, and that was a Camp K2 year, so that was to be expected. But this time around, the reason I was fat was because of me. I wasn't getting any exercise. I ate half a frozen pizza a day for lunch. And that was an improvement to a diet that consisted of fast food and pizza before I had a kid. But anyways, call this a midlife crisis, call it whatever you want. I don't know what happened, but everything started changing for me. See, my wife was way ahead of the curve and she had bought a Peloton bike before the pandemic started in January. And I looked at that thing with disgust every day. Until one afternoon, I had been scrolling on Instagram, and one of my favorite former guests, Johan Malkowski, had been doing something that he dubbed Operation Fat Fuck, or something like that. He was riding his bike a lot so he didn't get fat during the pandemic. I was already fat, so I thought, maybe I will do something like what Johan was doing, and I will do it on our Peloton bike, and I started that on April 19th. I started doing like 20 minutes a day and that was fine, whatever. I thought I was doing enough to counter the drinking that I was doing at night, but I wasn't really looking to lose too much weight at that point. Fast forward to July, I'm still riding the bike 20 minutes a day. I had lost a couple pounds, but for some reason, I decided to set a goal for myself to get down to 160 pounds. And once I set that goal, I really started getting into it, riding the bike twice a day, every day, and I changed my eating habits a little bit too. And now I'm at like 158 pounds, so congratulations to me. I'm not fat anymore, but my family thinks I'm crazy, and maybe I am crazy. I mean, when I think of what I've done in quarantine, it's weight loss, cutting out nicotine, stopping biting my nails. But you know what? While all of that sounds great to say, I would go back to being a fat-ass, pizza-eating, burger-chugging dude who could high-five friends and send my kid over to sleepovers in a heartbeat if it would get rid of this virus. And it sounds like a vaccine is right around the corner, so maybe I will get back to that life at some point. But until then, I have a podcast, and this week I have an awesome guest for you, snowboarder Danny Davis. I'm not going to spoil anything that we talk about in the podcast with this intro, so I'll just let you know that if you are listening on the release day of this podcast, you are listening on the day that we hit 1 million downloads. As I record this intro, we are at 994,000 listens, and in the next 6 days, we will get right up to 1 million, and I think when the Danny Davis podcast launches, we're going to be at 1 million listens, and you know what? That's exciting. I need to thank all of you for listening. It doesn't happen without you. So, woohoo! Crack a beer, smoke a joint. This week is all about hitting goals, and from the sounds of it, it's a lot about talking about me, which I guess happens every week. So we will end the talk about me, and we will get into the things that I need to say. Please follow me on whatever platform you listen to me on, and review me. I'll explain how to do that in the outro. If you want to see the pictures that go along with Danny Davis's incredible tale, follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement. And finally, please support my amazing sponsors who make this show happen. They're the 10 Barrel Brewery, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Cole Headwear. Now, it's time to chat with Travelin' Dan, Danny Davis.
I've been doing a bunch of stuff on my house, and just kind of the last week of it, the last hurrah, I'm going to just start focusing on the board. Turned into a bit of a contractor the last couple weeks.
Gonna be stoked when you're done? Is it gonna be your dream home?
Oh, fuck yeah. I've been working on this thing forever, and I'm never home to do all the little odds and ends, so it's been a ton of painting, and there's some tile guys here today. Been doing some work around the yard, cutting down trees that were looking like they want to fall on the house and stuff. So yeah, it's just been one of those times where I've been putting these things off for so long, and I was like, oh, I'm home for a few weeks. Let's do this.
Yeah, I would think this whole quarantine time is like time for you to get project shit done, because your life for the past 15 years has just been on a plane, living out of a suitcase.
Exactly. So recently, my fiance, she kind of came here this summer and was like, all right. So she like booked everything, kind of helped me get everybody scheduled, because it's so busy here in Tahoe, just the housing market and everything going on in Tahoe. There's just workers are just like so strapped for time. So it was like in July, reaching out to all my friends who do all this kind of stuff. And it was just like, holy crap, you guys are booking 3-4 months out, So it was like, booked this stuff back in July, and now it's all happening, and it's finally snowing here. And I'm like, damn, I want to be out in the mountains, but couple more days and I'll be out in the mountains every day.
Nice. Well, with these podcasts, I usually don't like to start them talking about sponsors at all, but with you have a sponsor in Mountain Dew that is the kind of shit that really gets me going, given I don't drink too much soda anymore, but I love it. And I was wondering, do you drink a shit ton of soda?
I no, historically, not really. My mom growing up was really not a fan of soda. Everything we would get would be caffeine free. She'd get Coca-Cola. It'd be caffeine free. So growing up, no. And then over the last few years, I've been kind of trying to drink less beer. And I noticed that like when I go out to dinner and I'm trying not to drink beer or just alcohol in general, I'm finding myself drinking more soda and juices and Arnold Palmers and stuff like that lately. Cause like the booze is just, when it becomes an everyday thing, it's like my body just feels it so much more.
And your lifestyle is something where if you're traveling, everybody wants to take you out for a drink after riding. Yeah, and that's just how it is. You have to do it almost.
Yeah, in a way. And, everybody's cool in our world. If you're not drinking, it's more when I go home to like Michigan or I go to Vermont or come back here and the homies are like, come over for a barbecue and they're like, what the fuck, man, have a beer.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't know. I'm in like one of those modes where I'm not drinking right now. So on the road, it's pretty easy because you're like an athlete, I feel like, but it's totally hard. You're absolutely right. You get off the plane, you meet up with the homies you haven't seen in months, especially after a quarantine and shit. So I went to the Burton premiere a week or two ago and I had a month off of booze, sober-tober style. And of course got to meet up with like all the homies. And I was just like, oh, damn.
Yeah. Like 5 beers in and you're like, oh my God, I can usually drink more than this.
Yeah, totally. But yes, I do drink soda. And personally, as far as the Mountain Dew goes, Fountain Dew is my favorite. I like it better out of the fountain.
And do they send you coupons or just flats of soda? Like, do you have as much soda as you possibly could ever want?
Hell yeah, if we want it. Back in the day when I was younger, a lot of my friends loved that. So I would have a pallet dropped off, quarterly or something like that of just like Gatorade and Dew and Pepsi and the little Starbucks drinks. Like you can pick all kinds of stuff from there.
Do you get Doritos and Cheetos and cheese dip as well?
We don't get to order the Lay's stuff or any of that. Or I haven't ordered any of that stuff. It mostly just sticks to soda and stuff. But dude, it just got so crazy and it was so hard to give away eventually to the homies. So then I started taking it to the fire department and taking it to the police station or the dump and giving it to the people there. And then it just got to a point where I was like, hey, Pepsi folk, can we just put it on hold for a bit? I just have too much soda and the mice were getting into it and shit, you know, and it was bad. So we used to do that. We don't do pallets anymore. I usually have them send it to something like Peace Park, or we definitely get through our fair share of Pepsi products. There's no doubt about that.
And you bring up Peace Park, but like Peace Pipe, I mean, originally there was a photo shoot each year. I think it was Burton and Mountain Dew kind of put it on, and it was like the big Burton shoot.
Totally.
And eventually that got boring and old and stale because a half-pipe competition is a half-pipe competition and a half-pipe shoot is a half-pipe shoot. It's the same shit forever.
Yep.
And you're like, we're going to change this shit up. And when you go to someone like Mountain Dew, are they totally willing to listen to your ideas and put whatever kind of money it takes behind it to make your vision a reality?
You know, yes. Like Dew, it's pretty insane. I mean, a lot of people talk shit, you know.
All the people that talk shit, they probably have an energy drink sponsor, and it's like, which is worse, an energy drink sponsor or Mountain Dew?
Or they don't have an energy drink sponsor, or they don't have a drink sponsor at all.
Then they're thirsty.
People kind of talk about how you're supporting child obesity or whatever, right? But the fact of the matter is, Mountain Dew has made so many things in my career possible, from back when we were all building private half pipes to try and get better for the Olympics. You know, when Kevin Pierce was doing it, Nike paid for his half pipe. When I was doing it, I was teaming up with people like Tora Bright and some other kind of Southern Hemisphere folk and building up some money. And Mountain Dew would support all that, and they'd support a filmer to go with me. They've just always been like, when I say like, I need help, they go to who they need to go to at Pepsi and say, hey, Danny's trying to go to the Olympics. Danny's trying to win X Games. Danny's trying to make this film project, whatever it is. And they go and they kind of fight for me and get me what they can. And it's not like I say what I want and it happens. It's a very like working relationship. But Fuse is a cool company who's kind of the middleman between me and Dew.
Okay.
And they are rad people. They're all snowboarders, they're skaters, they're mountain bikers. They're awesome people, and they've really been the key factor in making all these things happen, because they then go to Pepsi or Dew and say, hey, here's what Danny's thinking. Can you guys help him out? And a lot of the times, man, they are very, very accommodating when it comes to how much things cost.
Yeah, I mean, they've made such a difference in all of these sports, and, you know, there's a lot to be said for Mountain Dew and what they do. And really,
yeah,
everything's good in moderation, so it's like you can drink Mountain Dew, just don't drink 15 of them a day.
Exactly, you know, and the kids who drink them and stuff, yeah, man, you can't have 4 a day. You know, you maybe having a couple a week or something, really treating yourself when you go out and do something cool, or you win a soccer game or whatever it is. You know, you can treat yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, and the crazy part too is when you look at some of these old photos, like I'm thinking of that one where Brushy's doing like a little method in the middle of the slalom course. I think it's Brushy. And in the background, and I don't know, this must have been early 90s maybe, there's a fucking Mountain Dew logo on the gate. You know, like they've been kind of a part of this world for a long, long time. You know, when X Games was first going, you saw a lot of Mountain Dew stuff. I remember when Luke Mitrani was like 12 or 13 on Mountain Dew. I mean, they've just been in the game and supporting the action sports industry forever. So for me, I just am always so thankful to have them as a sponsor. And a lot of people definitely give me grief, but it's like these guys help support the industry, and I respect that.
Yeah, you know, if I think of like the two long brands that have stuck behind all the sports, it's like Mountain Dew and Taco Bell.
Yeah. And T-Bell and Dew have a tight relationship, you know?
Yeah. You know, in terms of where you grew up, I think you're pretty close to Flint, Michigan.
Yes, I am.
So if you were drinking Mountain Dew or bottled water growing up, that was probably way better than drinking the regular water there, which is pretty sad.
I know. Luckily, we were quite outside of Flint growing up, but that's just so bizarre, man. The fact that it's still going on. I mean, that water source has been contaminated for way too long.
Yeah, especially to be so close to like Detroit, which is a great midwestern city, and to
Right.
have like its suburb have shit water there where people are getting sick is terrible. And how far did you grow up from there? Were you like 8 Mile? Were you near Flint? Where were you growing up?
Where I grew up was called Highland. It's about, I don't know, half hour from Flint, 45 minutes from Flint. And that would be more north. And then to the south, it'd be like 45 minutes to Detroit.
Okay.
So if you're familiar with the area at all, like Novi, we're really close to Novi. Waterford, we're very close to. Pontiac, we're not very far from. But where I grew up is much outside the city. It's very rural. There's like horses and cows, and it doesn't take much to get out into the rural part of Michigan once you leave the cities.
Okay, and was it like the American dream going up, like mom, dad, older brother, maybe working at the Ford plant during the week, and then on the weekends your dad was watching Mickey and Danny crush it in sports?
Pretty much, man. My dad worked at he was a painter when I was really, really young. And then he started working a job at the proving grounds, the GM proving grounds, which are right down the street from our house, not too far, maybe a 15-minute drive. And yeah, my dad worked at GM for quite some time. And then he started working at an airbag manufacturing company called Autoliv. They are like the world's biggest airbag manufacturer. And so he's been doing that for years. He started at the proving grounds, crashing cars. They have like a big test track and they test all the cars there, crash them there, do all that stuff. And that's what my dad kind of got his roots in, was crashing cars. So then he moved over to Autoliv, where that's all he does now is test crash cars and kind of builds new airbags to keep people safe. Like the airbag stuff is pretty crazy these days. You got airbags that you get a certain amount of impact. They completely basically cover your entire inside of your car. So if you bounce around, you're just bouncing off airbags, and it's come a really long way. And he's into it, man. He's smart. He's an engineer. And he's a sharp guy. But yeah, kind of the American dream in a way. My mom was a working mom. She was a real estate agent. And my dad worked closer to the city. So he'd be gone and she'd be running us to soccer practice and football practice and baseball and golf and snowboarding and whatever. And then on the weekends, we'd all go do those activities together. We'd go snowboard. We'd play football. My dad would coach the team here and there. Me and my brother were pretty tight. He was a really cool older brother. He would take me skating and shredding. And so I kind of grew up with people older than me a lot of the time because my brother was so great about letting me hang out. But kind of the American dream, kind of the classic Michigan family. We loved to go out on the lake. We had a boat, lived on a lake for like half my life. We were super into the lake life, as most Michiganders, Minnesotans, all those people are, with the land of lakes. And it was a rad way to grow up. And with the snowboard hill about 10 minutes from my house, you know, that really changed the game. My mom being able to just like be able to do her job, drop me off, go do her work, leave for the whole day, come grab me at some point or whatever.
It was your babysitter?
Yeah, the mountain was my babysitter, and my mom was friends with the people who owned it, so she was pretty comfortable with me hanging up there all day by myself. And my brother would hang out with me a lot too up there, so it was crucial, man. I mean, 300 feet of awesomeness.
And it's funny that it was Alpine where you were growing up. You've got Alpine right near you now. But one thing that was even funnier to me is that you're chasing your brother around or hanging out with your brother growing up, and he's taking you to skate parks and stuff like that. But one thing that you did that he didn't do was rollerblade. And there was a big scene in Detroit back then.
Busted.
There was Airborne Skate Park, which had a ton of events.
Yeah, totally.
And were you into the whole scene back then?
You know, my brother kept it pretty cool. He would take me to skate spots, and he would take me to skate parks with him and his crew of skateboarders. And he'd be like, yeah, my brother's coming in. It was kind of like the joke. They would all make fun of me and stuff, but I was so little, you know, and I was just chucking backflips off stuff. And so they kind of loved it. You know, they'd be skating and I'd be rollerblading, chucking backflips and shit. And then one day, you know, my brother was just like, dude, you should start skateboarding. Like, it's really fun. Come skate over here with us. And started doing that, and then pretty much never rollerbladed ever again.
So there wasn't like a skate crew or anything like that. It was just something you did.
I had one friend who rollerbladed with me, but as soon as my brother was like, hey, you got to stop rollerblading and get on a skateboard. I remember getting a skateboard for my birthday. It was a Veriflex, which was like the cheap boards back then. If you remember, like, I think you could get Veriflex at like Kmart and stuff.
Yep.
So I got a Veriflex, and that changed me and my buddy's whole perspective. We started skating. We started building like all kinds of like boxes and lawn tramps. It was so much fun, man. And that was when it all kind of changed to just board sports for me. It became way more about skateboarding, way more about snowboarding. Winter went from being like really about like basketball. That was basketball season at our middle school. It went from being all about being on the basketball team to like, okay, as soon as I get out of basketball practice, I'm going to the hill.
And that's funny because it sounds like you were one of those kids that's born with a ton of natural talent. Like any sport you did, you were good at and you really worked hard at. But at the same time, you were teeny compared to a lot of the other kids. So was that like where your drive comes from? Was like being smaller than everybody else and having to work harder?
Yeah, and I think my dad's stories of that when he was a kid, he was the little guy. His last name, it's crazy how my last name is Davis because I take someone's name who I'm not even really that related to. But my dad's father's last name was Natter, and they used to call him the Nat out on the football field because he'd just be this tiny little guy, like annoying everyone, And that was totally like his stories and the way he pushed, football was something that me and my dad like really, really gelled on when I was younger. Like we watched games together. We watched footage of me playing football to better my football abilities. Same with baseball. He always coached baseball, football. He's a great golfer. We golfed a bunch, but it was just hanging with my dad and like the stories of him, whether they were like a little bit embellished or not, I don't know. But, he inspired me to just be a good athlete. And, a lot of people would talk about how little I was and stuff. And that would just fire me up, some kid who was twice my size when I was in middle school and I'd just tackle him at the waist and take him out. And people loved that. They'd be like, hey, this little guy taking this big guy down. So that kind of fired me up. But then I got hurt in football and that really bummed me out because I was missing skateboard season and it was pushing into my snowboard season. I broke my growth plate in my ankle. And that's when things started really changing from like, I do all sports to like, well, I don't want to get hurt for snowboard season, like playing football.
Right.
And so once I got to high school, I was like, Dad, I don't really want to play football anymore. And he was like, really? Damn. And I was like, I know, but like, it's just so intense. Like it's so aggressive and I got hurt and then I couldn't skate and that bummed me out. And he's like, all right, well, fucking A, don't play football, but he was always like, I got hurt in the middle of the season one year and I was like, I'm done. And he was like, no, man, you got to like finish the season. You got to go stand on the sidelines with your team. And, even though you got a broken foot, you got to be a part of it, man.
For sure.
You can be done with football next year, but you got to finish out the season. So, yeah, my dad was a big motivator in how I played sports, and even action sports too, for sure.
Well, being that you watched a lot of football with your dad, you guys had nothing to cheer about, and you probably will have nothing to cheer about forever based on the management of the Lions, which is sad. But you got the Tigers, Pistons, and Red Wings, so you've seen some championships. I don't know if you're around for the Bad Boys. But was the term earning your Red Wings conceived in Detroit?
Earning your Red Wings?
And if you don't know that one, we'll just pass over it like a Jewish holiday.
If that pertains to the boots, I believe Red Wing boots are a Minnesota thing.
Okay, we'll leave it at that, and then you'll find out what that means at some point, and you'll be like, I can't believe you fucking asked me that. What a disgusting person. But that's just whatever. It doesn't even matter. Speaking of Detroit, the area can be really, really dangerous. And what's the sketchiest situation you found yourself in Detroit?
Oh, man, I don't even know. Really, being a young kid, we didn't go down there much. And, when I got my driver's license, I was out of Michigan. My brother was kind of my only wheels as a kid outside of my parents. But, I do have a really sad story of an uncle of mine who, I think this is just the classic, anywhere in the country this could happen, but Detroit is a rough place. And Redford is one of those parts of Detroit that's pretty rough as well. And my uncle was just a contractor going to get paid by someone, and someone had been following him. And he got killed. He was going to get paid. He just got paid. I believe the story goes that someone was paying him for some work. He went in, got his money, was walking back out to his car. Someone mugged him and killed him for like $1,000 or something. He didn't have a ton of money from that job.
I'm sorry to hear that, man. It's crazy.
I know. And, it was an uncle that I didn't really know that well. It was my aunt's, a second uncle. But yeah, man, it's a rough place. But growing up, our area, Highland, Milford, Brighton, Waterford, pretty relatively safe to what I remember. Maybe it is a little bit sketch, but I don't remember it being that sketchy. I know when we went down to skate in like Pontiac or going to like Hart Plaza or anything like that, my mom would be a little bit more nervous when we would go down to kind of Pontiac, Detroit area. But growing up, nothing too dangerous. It was kind of more when I moved out of there and started to learn about how rough the area was. That's when I started to hear about things happening more. But it can be a rough area, but really where I grew up, where I lived, is pretty rural and pretty darn nice.
Well, you were never into the big urban scene in snowboarding at all.
Exactly.
But if you were, you had like a gold mine sitting there as long as you could make it out alive.
I've always dreamed I would go back to Michigan, if I ever got into. I've always wanted to do some street stuff, more because I like the whole like going in at night, being secretive, having the torches to melt shit. And like, I don't almost just want to be like a helper.
Just the mission.
Yeah, just the mission itself looks so rad. I'm a fan of the urban riding, and I really have these dreams of being able to actually go get some clips. And maybe it's not hitting like a big down, flat down or something like that, but maybe it's like some hand plant in the streets or like something different. That's something that I don't want to pass up on while my body will still allow it.
Well, I've seen it done in the ski world in Detroit, and just some of the places you can go there, some of those old abandoned factories are just incredible.
Totally.
Now it's time for me to take a sponsor break, and my first sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. If you haven't noticed, 10 Barrel supports so much in the world of ski, snowboard, and bike. But another cool thing about 10 Barrel is that they also do so much out-of-the-box fun shit, like giving away old Army vehicles filled with beer and so much more. I could go on and on about the antics, the Pray for Snow Winter Ale, and the Profuse Juice Hazy IPA that I've been drinking a ton of, or how they give back to protect our winters and support so many important athletes and causes, but I don't have enough time. To find out more, head on over to 10barrel.com and you'll get all that info, and next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel. My next sponsor is Stanley, and they pretty much invented the category of containers that keep things hot and cold. And there is no other product on the market that comes close to doing this as well as what Stanley does. If you've owned a Stanley, you still have it and know exactly what I'm talking about. And this year, if you're a skier or a snowboarder and you're going to do the mountain right, you're going to have soups, coffee, hot chocolate, and you're going to keep that all in the car. And most likely, you don't have all the containers you're going to need to keep that stuff hot or cold. The good thing is, I'm going to make it easier than ever for you to save 30% when you're buying the amazing products from Stanley. And all you need to do is to head on over to stanley-pmi.com, go shopping, enter the code DRINKFAST, that's all one word, all lowercase at checkout, and you'll get the deal and save 30%. Those are my sponsors. Now it's time to jump back into the podcast. With you and snowboarding, you have your mountain down the street. They've got a park and a few rails. And how long until you start dominating the Midwest series?
So yeah, like I probably started riding, doing some tricks by the time I started riding when I was like 9, 10 years old. Started standing sideways on sleds and stuff when I was probably like 6, 7 years old, but got my first snowboard at like 9. And by the time I was 12 or 13, I was going to nationals. So like by the time I was 12, the USASA series in our area, it was called the Middle Earth series.
Yep.
That was decently packed with riders, but I was doing well. So my parents were like, holy crap, you made it to nationals. Like, let's go. So we went to nationals. And then I ended up getting third at nationals. And my parents, like, they knew I was a pretty good snowboarder for Michigan, but maybe that there wasn't much talent out there in Michigan. So maybe it was easy. And then I went to nationals and they were like, whoa, you're like nationally good for your age. And they were like, that's great. How cool is that? So they were pretty hyped on how I did there. And, my parents were always supportive, no matter what the sport was. But, when we went to nationals and I did pretty well, I think they were like, whoa, we can put some effort into this. And we're down to put some more money into snowboarding and getting you out there riding more. So then we started going up to northern Michigan more. We started traveling out to Vermont and New Hampshire and doing some of the regional events out there, and just kept going, kept kind of pushing. And it went from like being able to do backflips at 12 years old at my home mountain to then by like 14, we were doing like US Open qualifiers.
And early on, I think you get hooked up by Climax snowboards. I want to say that just because Climax is one that I'm sure your mom was really stoked on. You came home with your new Climax.
Totally.
But you get to meet people at all these contests, and you're meeting some people who are going to become big names later on in life. But I think where you really get to meet people is when you go to Hood for the first time. When does that happen in your life?
That was before I went to Stratton Mountain School or anything. It was maybe 2 summers before I went to SMS.
So you're like 14, 15?
Yeah, I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. Like, I want to say I was 14. And I do remember another thing that'll make me a little more human and a little bit more of a kook. I was wakeboarding just before I went to Windell's, and I ended up breaking my ribs. I was trying some flip behind the boat or whatever.
Pete Rose.
I ended up breaking my ribs, and my mom was so upset with me because she spent all this money on sending me to Windell's, and I'm going with the U.S. team for their gold camp. It was kind of like their amateur level or kind of their younger kid level summer camp for the team, you know? And so I was getting this big opportunity to go train with the U.S. team. My mom was just so mad. And I remember eating like so much Advil that trip as a young kid, just pumping myself full of Advil to like get through the pain every day. But it was so much fun. And that's where I started to meet some cool people. Like, this guy's not so much in the industry anymore, but he's probably one of the most talented snowboarders I've ever known. Michael Goldschmidt. He was one of the better snowboarders I've ever watched, you know, just talent wise. I met him there. I met the Mitranis. I met my roommate now, Nick Russell. And that's kind of where I was introduced to the snowboard scene at the age of 14, where I was like, whoa, there's like this whole scene. There's like a bunch of kids my age who are like really good. And it was really fun. I mean, you know how Windell's is. You're skating after the mountain. But to me, it was all like, you know, I was friends with everyone, but I was so closely watching all these kids kind of like, okay, what tricks do I not have that they have? Where do I need to go to catch up to them and then get past them? You know, that's where it all kind of started, of like me trying to find where my style is, trying to find the tricks that I want to do. But at that point, it was like, I need a 540. I need a 720. I need a this. I need a that.
So it's like training for nationals every summer when you go to camp. It's like, all right, these are the kids I'm going to see at nationals, and these are the tricks I need to learn.
Exactly. And in my head, nationals, we were past that. It was more like Grand Prix, Triple Crowns. Those were the things like that I was looking at. I wasn't doing them at 14, but that next winter, that's what I was looking to do, was like get into some real pro level events, even though I had no chance of doing well, you know, like it was all kind of a vision and not so much a possibility at that point.
Well, you say it's all kind of a vision and not a possibility, but if you look at it, you know, fast forward 2 years, you get like second in nationals or something, and you're able to compete on the pro tour, or at least, you know, be able to make money at contests. And I think you get your first podium at your second big pro event, and it's one of the biggest events in the world. It's the Gravity Games, and this is huge.
Yeah.
And when you go to a venue like that, where there's global coverage and you're so young, what's going through your head at 16?
You know, that point, just in general of my snowboard career, my life, everything was moving what seemed like so fast.
Yeah.
You know, I was young and it was all just such a dream come true. So I was 14, went to Windell's. That next year, I started going at 15 years old, started going to Stratton Mountain School. After that Windell's year, I went and traveled to 2 pro level contests with my mother, not with the team. I wasn't going to school there yet. So me and my mom were trying to kind of like still do public school, but still try to do some events. That's where I won my first $800. I got like 7th or something in a Vans Triple Crown in slope style. And like Danny Cass was in the finals.
Are you starstruck?
Oh yeah, dude, I was tripping. I mean, Danny Cass was like, you know, Danny Cass, Ross Powers, Keir Dillon.
You gravitate towards the East Coast guys.
Yeah, not even knowing that they were from the East Coast, though. You know, I was too young to put that together. It was more Grenade and stuff that I was really drawn to, just that whole scene. So I did start to do some Grand Prix, some Vans Triple Crowns. I did some U.S. Opens. And then, yeah, by senior year of high school, I went to Gravity Games. And this was like one of the earlier trips I ever did with Burton. So I was like staying with Ross Powers. I was staying with Keir Dillon. I was with Kevin Pierce. I was kind of on the Burton team at that point. They were like giving me stuff and flying me around the world and giving me a place to stay when I went to contests. And so I was just pig and shit, man. Like, honestly, I could have done horrible at that event and I probably would have felt exactly the same. But what the trip was my parents were there and they didn't make it to like every event at this point because they were busy folks and they still are. But it just was like, holy shit, I can podium at an event. Like, I was watching Kevin Pierce do this at a few events before I got that. But that was really the kind of like kickoff to like, holy shit, I can get results.
So was it kind of like almost there wasn't any extra pressure on you? You're just kind of like stoked to be there. And then
There was zero extra added. There was zero pressure. I was going to school at a boarding school. Like, I didn't even know what a boarding school was until I got talked to by Waterville Academy or SMS or whatever, and I didn't know that people didn't go to public school and went to other private schools. Like, it was just being from Michigan. I just didn't even know about that, really.
Yeah, I mean, who comes out of Michigan to be a big name pro snowboarder like you're going to be? Not too many people.
Well, we got Sherman Poppin, we got Chris Ingelsman.
Huh.
There's not too many. But, at that point, there was no pressure because everything was just so fucking rad. I mean, I was traveling the world with the Burton Snowboards team. But what that result did for me mentally was like made me feel equal with, or at least getting closer to getting equal with like Kevin Pierce, Mason Aguirre, the guys who were like my age, but killing it, doing really well for our age,
Yeah.
And then the other thing was we would come back every night. Ross and Kier were super into poker. We'd play poker every night and I'd lose money to these guys every night. And then I went and beat them at the contest and it was like crazy for me, and Kier and them were giving me shit because like I was the one with the money at the end of the contest. They're like, all right, we're going to take your money and poker and stuff. But it kind of made me one of the boys, it felt like, in a way. And then that was kind of the start of it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that's kind of when the whole Frends thing comes together. And that thing was catchy. We drop the I because it's not about one person. It's about a crew and creating a vibe and all that rah-rah shit. And in the beginning, it really seemed like it was like that. I mean, snowboarding was like summer camp and you guys had your own Frends bunk, it seemed like. And you had your cool camp counselor and Kier Dylan.
Yeah, totally.
And was that kind of how it was? A traveling circus with Kier as the leader of your crew?
100%. And Dave Driscoll was our team manager at Burton Snowboards. He was a big part of that Frends thing too. So he was kind of like our dad at Burton Snowboards.
Okay.
He was like the guy who would pick us up at the airport. And we were young, we were 17 years old and 16 years old. And Dave would just like, he was kind of our dad. Me, Kev, Jack, Luke, Mickle, another guy by the name of Michael Gardzina, also known as Chaka at Burton. Those two dudes, Dave and Chaka, really were our dads. And then Kier was kind of like the elder statesman of our snowboarding. Like when we would get to contests and stuff like that, he was just so dialed. He'd been doing it so long that he was like our mentor and stuff like that. But Dave Driscoll was really like kind of the dad of the Frends crew. He would get us places. He made some of the first t-shirts, some of the first bandanas, some of the first stickers. But him and Kier, yeah, they were kind of running the funny farm, and Mickle and Luke and Jack and Kev and Mace and myself and Lego. And then it started to not even matter if you were on Burton or not. You were just rolling with us, like Mason was on Palmer at the beginning of me being on Burton. And eventually Burton just scooped him away from Palmer. And yeah, man, that crew was really, when you say like, was there this added pressure? Like that crew was how we survived, how we didn't get pressure at contests. It was because, I mean, if you can imagine what you were like at 16, what any 16, 17-year-old is like, 18-year-old, you're just living. Like politics don't matter. Other people don't matter. Doing stupid shit doesn't matter. It's just all about you and your friends and getting a laugh and having a good time. There's nothing else that matters. Your morals are completely different when you're 16, 17, 18. So it was really like at all costs, just have fun.
So with your crew, where some people, they get put into that lifestyle and it makes them grow up really fast, when you have like 8 kids like you guys, it kind of makes you be the same idiots just on a bigger level because there's 8 of you, right?
Yeah, and it's a little bit enabled.
Yeah. It's like encouraged. Everything's encouraged.
I think my fiance would say the same thing, that like she always says like our house here in Tahoe is kind of like the Lost Boys, like Peter Pan and the Lost Boys, because she says a lot of me and my friends just never grow up. I just poured like a skate park in the front yard while she's been gone. And she's like, what the hell? We have a skate park now in the front yard. And I'm like, well, yeah, I've always wanted one. And yeah, we're big kids, man. And yeah, when you were young and you were get to having that fun at all costs and people were filming it and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
And kind of like getting content out of it and kind of enabling you, like totally being like, dude, that shit's funny, do it again.
Yeah.
Bust a hole in that wall, whatever it was. And that only escalated. By the time I was 20, 21, I felt like I was a little bit of a punk and actually a lot of it reckless. But yeah, you grow up fast and then you have people who keep you in check. And Kier was one of those people who, like, when he saw you doing something stupid or saw you being wrong to somebody or being mean or just being out of character, not a good person, those people would point it out. Driscoll, Kier, Kevin Pierce was like my age, but like 10 years older than me. He was just always a much more mature human.
Okay.
Mason, we all just kept each other in check when we were doing stupid shit. And that got more and more and more. And now we're all in our 30s and Lego's got a baby. Jack's got a baby. Kev just had a baby. Kier's got a couple. It's just funny how things go. But I think we're all pretty young at heart still and still kind of do some stupid things.
Well, you guys all live amazing lifestyles and that will keep you young at heart. But when I say the camp analogy and I think about snowboarding, there's two camps in snowboarding, really. While the Frends had their own bunk at the camp and with a cool counselor and all that, it almost seemed that Shaun White had his own camp entirely, like a different camp. And did it feel that way to you guys, where it was like a whole crew of competitors, Frends and everybody else, and then Shaun on an island?
It felt like that sometimes, I mean, part of me now looks back and feels kind of bad, but he kind of did it to himself. He didn't really want to be a part of it. And I think at times when we were younger, like maybe Shaun felt like we ousted him a little bit, like he wasn't welcome in our circle. But then there was times when we really made him, like, we stayed with him, hung out with him, had him stay with us, whatever, and like to be a part of it. And then we'd be like, dude, Shaun's awesome. And then something shitty would happen or whatever. And I'd end up being like, yeah, fuck that guy. And I think the hard part for us was Shaun was always fun. Snowboarding with him was fun. Hanging out with him at night and jamming, playing guitar, that was fun. And Jack and Kev were much better friends with him than I was. But at the end of the day, what was tough for me was that when we got up to the top of the course or got into practice, Kevin could still give me a high five and a hug before my run. Jack could still smack me in the ass and kick me in the ass or whatever and have fun up at the top of the pipe, where Shaun just couldn't really be rad in the moment. He just really was on his own program. When he would build a half pipe, he'd build it for himself. When Kevin would build a half pipe, he'd invite all of us, and so Shaun's mentality just wasn't really down with what we were about. And what we were about was friends are the most important thing. Friends and family are the most important thing over snowboarding, over everything. And we do better when we are cheering for our friends and not just focusing on ourselves. And when there was other people who were like that, we welcomed them in, they were a part of the crew. Mickle, Eric Jackson, all these people who like kind of, weren't the people we travel with all the time. But then we would meet these people, but like the crew started to get bigger and bigger. But the people who didn't fit really didn't fit. And Shaun naturally kind of made himself someone who really didn't fit, because everything that he did was all about himself and not really kind of to have fun with his friends.
Sure. And I'm not going to defend the guy because I don't know him at all by any means.
And I will defend him, though. He was on a path that probably we should have been on a little bit. If we were going to be real badasses in the snowboard world and be the greatest half-pipe riders of all time, Shaun is an insane snowboarder. He's unbelievably talented. And, when you look at the Michael Jordan documentary or any of these other phenoms in their sports, they're assholes at times because they're so focused on themselves. And that's what it takes sometimes. So, like, I don't blame him at all. The kid had a path. He had a vision. And we were a part of it. He saw, you know, gold medals at the Olympics and things like that. And he, friendship didn't matter. Like, it was like, fuck that. I'm going to win.
Well, when I say I wouldn't defend him, I'm just saying I can't defend him because I don't know him, but I look at his life and times and it's like, you weren't born to be a champion snowboarder like he is, given you worked your way into it and did it. But from the time that dude was like 6 years old, he was like on the cover of Burton catalogs for Chopper, and he was the future of snowboarding. And he was always expected to be the best, and he always had more pressure than everybody else. So at this point, it's kind of like he's had such a different experience in snowboarding, like Michael Jordan in basketball, or any of these amazing athletes that you think of at the top of their sport. And it's like, yeah, he is trained to be the Terminator and kill and win. And he does. And I look at that as part of his upbringing, man. He's been a pro since he was like 6.
Yeah, he's a phenom. You're a prodigy, And dude, I don't know if he chose that path for himself at 6 years old or who did, but it seemed to have worked out. And quite possibly nobody's as talented on a board as that guy.
Yeah.
Whether it's surfing, whether it's skating, whether it's snowboarding. And then when I look at things outside, like the kid is a ripping guitar player. And Shaun seems to be one of those people who's pretty good at whatever he tries.
Yep.
One thing I've always been very, very jealous of is how he can roll up after not snowboarding for months, weeks, months, and just snowboard in a halfpipe better than I could after weeks of training. That shit always blew my mind, where I'd be like, man, I haven't seen Shaun in a while. And then he pulls up to like X Games or the US Open and just like throws down some ridiculous shit. I'm just like, I have to snowboard a lot. I have to snowboard every day to stay consistent and to keep the things going, and to be able to just roll up to anywhere and just crush it. It just blows my mind.
Now it's time for me to take another sponsor break. And next up is Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. This week, Peter Glenn is teaming up with Osprey Packs to give away an amazing Osprey prize kit. It includes a Canberra 16 backpack in Ripcord Red, a 4-season reservoir insulation kit, a dry sack, a beanie, and other Osprey swag. To enter, make sure you follow both Peter Glenn Sports and Osprey Packs, like the giveaway Instagram post, and tag 2 friends in the comments. Winner will be picked Monday, December 21st. To find out more about all things Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, head on over to peterglenn.com. Next up, it's Cole Headwear. And you know what everyone needs this winter? A beanie. And a lot of times you get a beanie and it doesn't have the right fit and you end up looking stupid. That has happened to me way too often in life. Until I found Cole Headwear. I've been wearing their beanies at least 10 years before I started this podcast because I knew when I bought one, it would look right on my head. And my shit always looks fresh because I wear Cole. That goes for hats too, but it's winter, so we're talking beanies. And I'm going to save you 15% off your entire Cole order. When you head on over to coleheadwear.com, go shopping, enter the code POWEL, the number 15. It's all one word, no caps or spaces, and you will get that 15% off. Those are my sponsors. Now it's time to jump back into the podcast. I won't say it's Frends against Shaun White by any means because there's no contest like that, but you guys have like 3 or 4 dudes that can easily make the Olympic team because the Olympics are coming around. Shaun's definitely a favorite to make the Olympic team as well. And Kevin Pierce and yourself are both capable of beating Shaun. I think you've both beaten Shaun. Scotty Lego as well. He's got a chance to beat him as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a chance going into this Olympics that you guys could take 1, 2, and 3, which is just like mind-blowing because you guys are going to make headphones now with Frends. And if you guys are able to do anything like that, Frends is going to be bigger than anything you guys could ever imagine. Were you guys thinking about that going into the Olympic year? Like, hey, we're going to make this product and then our success is going to make this product blow up? Or was that just like icing on top of the cake if it worked out?
Man, I don't even know if we were thinking that far. You know, the headphone thing, like the actual product at that age, I think the actual idea behind the company was what we were all about. Just friends, just partying with our friends, doing activities with your friends, sports with your friends, whatever it was that you were doing was going to be better if you had friends to do it with. And that was just our mentality that we were just cruising with. The actual product and how much money we could make and shit, I don't know. I was always so weary of it. I was weary of giving money to people to run a company who had never gone to school to run a company, who had never run a company in their life.
Yeah.
You know, I'm skeptical on things when they're not clear. So the Frends headphones thing was always kind of like, I was never thinking we were going to make a bunch of money. But then down the road, we ended up being in Apple stores and stuff like that. And I remember being like, holy crap, is this going down? But going into the Olympics, man, everything was all about boarding. Everything was all about double corks, learning new tricks, having the tricks that other people didn't. That's what I remember going into that Olympics thinking. And Kev was pushing it so hard. Like, we got to learn this stuff. I got to learn this stuff. And Kev was kind of my idol in a way. He was my age. He was winning everything. He was so fucking focused, but he could have fun. He was much like Shaun, where he had that drive and that focus where he could be an asshole to people up there and just focus on himself. But he had that great quality. He was a human and he could smile with you and hug you at the end of your run. So Kev was really the leader of the pack in the snowboarding. And I was just like, you're right. We need to learn these tricks. Shaun's learning these tricks. He's got a private pipe. Kier's doing this. And there's other riders at that time like Auntie Audi and Risto Matala, and like Lego was in that. Lego was a really good boarder. So it was all about learning tricks that other people didn't have, like literally didn't have. Like being able to do a frontside double cork 1260 or 1080 was something that very few people had at that time. So I was not thinking about money. I was thinking all about tricks.
And what makes you think about something totally different, I would think, is Kevin gets hurt before the Olympics a few months before.
Yeah.
That's a full-on life changer for him right there. Are you there for that?
Yeah, we were there. We actually were in Aspen. We had a pipe built, and then it sucked. It had a huge curb in the bottom, and we ended up bailing and going to Park City to meet up with the U.S. team where they had a pipe that they were training in. And yeah, I was there that day. I was one of the first people to Kev, and it was gnarly, man. And I was really mad at snowboarding for a week or two after that. I just didn't really understand like why something I loved so much and something we all enjoyed so much would, if destiny is a thing and shit happens for a reason, why the fuck would this happen to Kevin? I mean, he's a great person. He's leading all of us. He's a real human being who's great at a sport. Why, if all things happen for a reason, would this happen to this guy? And why would snowboarding do that to my friend? And it was just a big like, hey man, shit happens. Not everything happens for a reason. It was different. It was a big life lesson for me that things can just happen. You have to be careful. You have to be ready. And the sport we're doing is dangerous. Yeah. That really opened my eyes and scared me for a little while. And it pissed me off. I was really mad just at competing and at pushing myself to do these tricks because Kev was unconscious for weeks,
Yeah.
So it was terrifying.
But while it makes you really mad at the sport, it also lights a fire under you because contest-wise, it's like you are riding it the best you've ever ridden in your life, I feel like, at that point. Before he got hurt, you won a dew tour. Then after he gets hurt, you win a Grand Prix. And then your third win qualifies you for the Olympics. So going into that last event in Utah, does it feel like just the rim is so big and there's no way you're not going to land your run? Are you that confident?
Yeah, at that point, man, we just had the tricks dialed. And the other thing that was working to my favor, not to like take anything away from me, but there was a thing going on where there was 22-foot pipe contests and 18-foot pipe contests at that point.
Yep.
The dew tours were 18-foot. The Olympic qualifying stuff was 22-foot. And a lot of guys like Shaun, maybe even like Louis Vito. There was a bunch of people, maybe even Kev was on this program at some point, but they would not do the 18-foot contest because they were worried that it would screw up their perception of the half pipe and they would start chucking tricks wrong. So they only wanted to ride a 22.
Okay.
They didn't want to do the 18-foot contest. So that was pretty sweet. And yes, my riding I was consistent, maybe as consistent as I've ever been. But shit was just clicking for me. It was just like, sweet. I know this run. I can do this run in my sleep. I can do it hungover. I can do it whenever. And I can do it in an 18-foot pipe. I can do it in a 22-foot pipe. It didn't concern me. And that got rid of some of the competition in that year. So like Shaun wasn't doing them. There's a bunch of people who weren't doing the 18-footers. And so I had a little bit easier time at those 18-foot competitions because a lot of the competition was just opting out.
I would think whenever Shaun doesn't show up at a contest, it feels pretty much like you have a better shot at winning.
It's not even that you have a better shot at winning. There's just one more open seat on the podium. Because you know Shaun's going to podium if he's at an event. Or at least at one point you did.
Yes.
I don't know about now, but at one point, if Shaun was there, yes, chances were he was going to win. And if he didn't win, he would be somewhere on the podium. And, once Kev was hurt, I felt like Shaun really had not a sigh of relief. He was genuinely worried about Kev. I would never say that he wasn't. But competitively, there was a big, big void because Kev was a force at that point. Kev was winning everything at that point.
Yeah. Well, you end up qualifying for the Olympic team, and I'm sure you have a ton of media to do after that contest. You have to call friends and family, and that's when your terrible after-school special starts, when it's time to party. And that's something that you do, and that's fine. And any young kid sometimes makes dumb decisions. You got on a four-wheeler, and you mess yourself and a buddy up, and you guys are in a bad way. The good news is you didn't kill anybody. The bad news is you guys weren't anywhere like near a road, or you weren't going to be found easily. And I think that's the one part of the story is how do you even get out of there when you're like in the woods by this fence and you guys are both like pretty fucked up? How do you get out of that situation and into the hospital?
Dude, it was sort of like a guardian angel kind of scenario because I don't know how it happened, man. It's all pretty foggy to me. But basically, me and my buddy Elliot are laying by this fence. I'm unconscious. He's got a broken femur.
Jesus.
And he army crawls to the road, like on his stomach, like G.I. Joe style. Crawls out to the road, which is not a main road. This is like a really fancy subdivision we're in. It was actually the old DC Mountain Lab, if you remember that.
Yep.
We were at the DC Mountain Lab and took the four-wheeler. So we were out in kind of like a really high-end subdivision, with big, huge homes with 10-acre plots. So he army crawled out to the road and just luckily someone happened to be leaving the party, I think at, this was late, man, 2, 3 in the morning, maybe 1, 2 in the morning. And some kids were leaving and they saw Elliot on his stomach and Elliot was like, hey, my buddy's hurt over by the fence. And those dudes ended up dropping us at the hospital and saved our lives, like saved Elliot's for sure. He had a broken femur, like big open wound.
Oh, man.
I would have froze to death. I was knocked out. Easily would have gotten hypothermic and froze to death. And the gnarly part for those kids were they just dropped us off at the emergency services. We're like, cool, thanks, guys. They didn't hear from us for weeks. They never knew what happened to us. And halfway down, the adrenaline kind of kicked off. And we started feeling the pain, me and Elliot. And I guess we were in crazy pain in the car.
Oh.
Like really agonizing and really probably pretty wasted. So I forever indebted to those guys, and it was a gnarly thing, man. It was scary, and I had to call the guy who saved us weeks later. He like wrote to me on Facebook or something, and he was just like, I just checking in, make sure you guys are okay. And I was like, oh my God, we never called this guy and let him know. Like I didn't even know who the guy was until we talked on the phone. So yeah, that was kind of a guardian angel situation, I think.
And then when you're in the hospital, you probably have a moment of clarity where you realize everything's taken away and that sucks, but you realize you made a bad decision and that's part of it. But is it just totally embarrassing having to call team managers, having to talk to family and friends, and you had everything in your hand and you don't have it anymore? And
yeah, super awkward. And on so many levels, yeah, there were the team managers. I mean, luckily I had really cool people around me for team managers, and every brand that I rode for at the time was like, Danny, you're a fucking moron, but get back to 100%. Like, we're mad at you, but we understand, and we just want you back, man. We just want you back healthy. We want you back snowboarding. Nobody was like trying to drop me or anything like that. Everybody was just like super supportive. But I think what made me feel the worst was when Jake came to see me in the hospital. And I was just like, oh, man, he was so rad. But when Jake came to see me and my family in the hospital, that just made me feel so great and so weird at the same time. And I just felt really lucky to be on Burton.
Yeah, to have the namesake of the company come visit you in the hospital is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, having Jake, like, he was just such a, I don't know why, but like Jake seemed to like, and maybe because he was tight with Kevin and I was tight with Kevin, him and Kev were super tight, but Jake always just was so rad to me. And when he came in and saw my parents at the hospital, it just made my life so much easier. And I was so thankful because my mom had a real sense of like relief, I think. You know, my mom was really worried that I was going to like stop making money. And, you know, she was pretty upset with me that I was just loose like that and just put myself and my contracts in jeopardy. I made the Olympic team. Now I'm not going to the Olympics. Like, she was like, man, you really fucked up, Dan. And it was hard. It was like, I knew it. And I knew she was bummed on me and I was bummed on myself. And when Jake came to see me and gave me the blessing of like, hey, dude, you're an idiot, but shit happens. So get better and let's go snowboarding. I think it made all of us feel a little bit better. I think my parents were like, holy shit, that guy's awesome. And he's supporting our son no matter what. Let's chill out a little bit on the gnarliness of Danny. You're an idiot. You know, you might be losing contracts. You might not be snowboarding ever again. Like, you really fucked up, man. So, yeah, it was a weird time, man. And really what was the bummer in the initial stages, like the first week I was in the hospital, was I was watching X Games from my hospital bed. And I still was hooked up to a catheter and I couldn't pee on my own. They assumed I would be able to walk and all that stuff, but they were like worried about me not being able to go to the bathroom on my own ever again. And like, there was some stuff going on in those first couple weeks that were like, are you going to be snowboarding again at the level you did, you know?
Yeah, so you're scared for your quality of life as well as just...
Yeah, your quality of life, exactly. And really, at that point, I was just young and stupid, and all I could think about was snowboarding. I was just tripping on the fact that I wouldn't be able to do what I've been doing for the last few years.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always a huge level of risk, and you happen to take that risk to partying, which happens with young kids, man. People do dumb shit. I've done plenty of dumb shit, and
yeah,
you're lucky you're still here. I'm lucky I'm still here, and that's kind of it. I know we have a hard stop in like 15 minutes, so I'm going to ask you now if we can continue this interview at some other time so we can get through the rest of your life and times if you'd be down.
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay, and now I'm going to tell you I end my interviews with something called Inappropriate Questions. And
yeah, let's do it.
So you might know what it is. I get one of your friends to ask 3 questions. I think they might have asked more, but I was able to connect with Luke Mitrani, and he was on his way to being the next big thing. He hurt himself, and he's got a great music career going on right now. He was able to come up with some questions. He talked to his brother Jack as well. So I'm going to play question number 1 for you right now.
All right.
All right, Danny, what is up, brother? Question number 1. What is the craziest thing you've ever witnessed at the friendly gathering? Boom, go.
Okay, question 1. Craziest thing I've ever witnessed at the friendly gathering? Oh boy, there's so many. I think this happened the last year we had a friendly gathering. There was a guy who, I'm not sure what happened, if somebody gave him drugs or he ate too many mushrooms or acid or what happened, but the guy got into something a little too much, overdosed himself a bit. And I heard over the radio, like, can Danny and Jack switch over to channel whatever? And so I went over to the other channel and they were like, hey guys, we got a guy. If somebody can go kind of like wrangle him, he's naked, he has an erection, and he's trying to hug people, and he's scaring a lot of people at the music fest. So like, I'm looking around, you know, it's not a very big, it's like 30, 40 acres that we're kind of on. And I'm looking around, I see up on the hillside, and there's just this naked dude running around with a boner, and he's like running at people, but he's totally being nice, and he's not being aggressive. And like, we had to like go wrangle him in. And he was really, really fucking jacked up, and it was hard to wrangle. The medics and the security guys were kind of like trying to wrangle him together.
And was he hard the whole time?
Oh, totally, man. Like, this guy was and he had so much power behind him, you know, like the drugs or whatever he was on had him so jacked up, and he was so hard to like take down and get a hold of and get him down to medical. But I felt so bad for the guy after, because it was just like, oh man, his parents came, you know, I felt bad, you know, the kid didn't mean to do it. And I've obviously been in some situations where I've overdone it and done some stupid things. So I felt really bad for the guy, but there's a lot of things that have gone down at the Friendly Gathering, but that is one of the ones that pops out in my mind. The guy who took too much acid and started running around the festival with an erection trying to hug people.
All right, that's amazing. We're going to play through question 2 and into question 3 because you'll see why.
Question 2. So how was it being in charge of that naked dude who got up on stage? What did you do? What was that experience for you?
So we'll go right into question 3 from here.
All right, Danny. What is the story about when we all ate mushrooms at your house and we couldn't figure out the blue screen? And the truth is, I really want you to tell me because I don't even know what the story is. But I know there's some crazy stuff that happened that night because that was a crazy night.
There you go. The story behind the blue screen.
So yeah, question 2, you guys heard it. You got the naked guy story. Question 3, we were young guys experimenting with psychedelics. We ate some mushrooms from this guy's closet, and I think I have some photos of the mushrooms still. Some of them were like as big as our heads were.
Whoa.
Yeah, they were crazy looking. And I remember that I had to go pick up Mason from the airport. So like I didn't dive in when everyone else did. I had to run and get Mason from Reno Airport. And then when I got back, we dived in. And we started in the evening. And so it was kind of like bright outside. I remember laying outside a bit. And then we couldn't figure out my TV. You know how like when you can't figure it out, sometimes the screen goes blue?
Yeah.
And you're on just a blue screen. Well, it was blue screen and it made my whole house blue. And we couldn't figure out how to turn the TV off. We couldn't figure out how to get the blue screen to get to a different screen. And I just remember all of us just piled up in my couch. Like, I'm pretty sure Lego was here. I'm pretty sure Mason, Jack, Luke. I don't know if Kev was here, but we had a big crew. And everyone was just piled out on the couch, terrified of this blue light that we couldn't figure out how to get off. And then the night continued from there. We walked out the mountain and went up to this. There's like this cell phone tower on top of the mountain behind my house, or the hill that we live on. You can climb up this cell phone tower that's pretty cool, and you overlook all of Truckee. And yeah, it was a long night. I can't believe Squid asked me that question. But essentially, a bunch of idiots stoned out on mushrooms who couldn't figure out how to turn off a TV. That's what happened there.
All right. Well, I do have one more bonus question. It's from Jack, but Luke is asking it, and I'm going to play it right now.
Here is a question from Jack. He asked me to ask, what is the story behind the first time you guys got drunk at our house?
Yeah, that was probably my first time ever drinking. Thanks to Jack and Mike Goldschmidt for being the people who broke my drinking cherry. I wasn't good friends with these guys yet. I had just gotten to SMS for my first year of school, and I was trying to fit in. I was trying to hang out. I didn't really know anybody at this point. I knew of Jack and Luke. I knew Kevin Pierce, but like he wasn't going to school there. And so everybody's like, let's go over to the Mitranis and hang out. So a few of us went over there. I think it was my buddy Joey Hodges, myself, Mike Goldschmidt, and Jack. And they were like, yo, let's get drunk. And I was like, whoa, crazy. So we broke into Jack's dad's wine cellar, which didn't take much to break into. You just opened the door.
Right.
But he had this really rad wine cellar, man. This house that the Mitranis had was unreal. Like this beautiful house in Stratton, super old, probably like 1700s, maybe early 1800s. I have no clue. Really cool. And so down in the basement was this really rad wine cellar full of a ton of shit. And for some reason, we decided to grab amaretto. And for those people who amaretto's not ringing a bell, it is like this liqueur, like this dessert syrup.
Like sweet.
Really sweet and really thick that you put on things. And sure enough, we drank the whole bottle of amaretto. And we were hitting each other maybe with guitars and trying to break guitars over people's heads. I remember Goldie, like, we started to walk down to 7-Eleven. And, you know, just like many things in my life, the Mitranis, that was my introduction to being drunk. And it was a blast. And I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I probably threw up. But that was The early drinking days for Dan and Jack. Luke, I don't think was with us.
No, he said you put him to bed, and then you guys did that.
Yeah, we put Luke to bed. Right. Jack was morally at least like, hey, Luke can't drink with us. He's only 10. Gosh, nice question, Mitrani brothers. Jeez, really throwing me under the bus.
Yeah, they really came through, and I want to thank you for your time. Your life and times have been amazing so far, and there's still so much more to go, and we can schedule another interview in the next few weeks and get it done and lay down your whole life and times.
Let's do it.
I thank you for your time now. Have a good time doing whatever you're doing. I think you're laying tile and doing other stuff, so enjoy that.
Thanks, buddy. Good chatting, Mike.
So that was time with Danny Davis, and what a cool dude that guy seems to be. He's got like part jock to him, part hippie, and part rad dude all mixed into one. And while I'm sure Danny has had his share of media training, he is not afraid to keep things real, and that's what makes this conversation so great. Lucky for all of us, Danny is back next week to complete his story. So that's all I have for you this week. At this point, I want to thank you for listening, ask you to rate and review me on iTunes or wherever you listen to the podcast. If you're on an iPhone, here's what you need to do. First, click on the podcast icon. Second, search for the Powell Movement. Third, click on my logo. Fourth, scroll down to where you see the stars. Fifth, click 5 stars. And if you're feeling really nice, write a little review. All of this helps the show grow and it makes me feel better about myself for some reason. Finally, I want to ask you to support my amazing sponsors. They are at the 10 Barrel Brewery, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Cole Headwear. Have a great week, everyone.